Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. It's a very great joy for me to be with you again here. This is another home. And that we are all related. I'm finally, even at 76 years old, learning most of your names. And I keep many of you in prayer every day. I hope you will pray for me as well. Today we're celebrating a great feast of the Christian family. This really is a feast of what a Christian family should be ideally. Many of you, like me, as Americans, probably don't care that much for monarchy. But regardless of that, this family was a family in Jesus Christ. And they were called to a service by God to rule a nation and to be examples of Christ's people for all the people of Russia and the world. I think Russia, that Orthodoxy came to Russia, the largest landmass country of the world, for a reason, so that all the world could be brought to Jesus Christ. And I pray that now that communism has fallen, that will become more and more a reality. That the Russian Orthodox Church, the largest church in the world, will bring all men to Jesus Christ. This is our hope. But in this family we have a wonderful example of Christian love. We have a man who, because of his position, was called upon sometimes to do harsh things. But he was very reluctant to do so. Very reluctant to do so. Only when it was very necessary did he follow St. Paul's prescription to use the sword to keep order in the land. I think he did it more by prayer, by humility, than anything else. There are many people who say that he was a very weak leader. But now, historians, now that they're sort of out from under the prejudices that really rule them as well as most people in the world, they're beginning objectively to see that he was in fact quite a good ruler. And that by Christian life, love, and humility, that he was able to accomplish a great deal. The prosperity of Russia was very great at the time that the communists came. Perhaps people had become too accustomed to worldly comforts, to worldly power, and so forth, and wanted more and more of it, and forgot who they really were, the people of God, the people who are meant to sacrifice themselves. And this is the way that we attain real power, by giving our lives, by giving ourselves in service, as an example to others, and our very lives in many cases. So this is exactly what this family was called to do. The parents, even though we see pictures of them in these wonderful gowns and jewels and all of this, which are worldly, I personally can't see any justification for any of that, personally. But they never let it enter their soul. It was not who they were. It was somehow just something that the world expected of them. And so they had to do it. The children all had chores, just like any other Christian children have. They had responsibilities. They were not pampered. These beautiful girls were not pampered at all, but they slept on army cots rather than in cushy feather beds. And they, when the time came for service, they gave themselves in service to others. They went onto the front lines and served in hospitals not for some kind of photo op, as is done most often these days when our leaders go to places, to institutions and other places for the help of people, and have their pictures taken and can't wait to get out so that they can have a big meal together with drinks and everything else away from these people. But these girls were there serving, emptying bedpans, dressing wounds, comforting the soldiers who were there to fight for the homeland. They were there to give support to them as human beings and as representatives of those who were charged with ruling the people. The Tsar himself took his son, Alexei, to the front lines where they encouraged the soldiers, risked their own lives in order to give them hope, when so often they were giving up hope because of the terrible afflictions, tribulations, the ferocity of that horrible war, supposed to be the war to end all wars. Fortunately, it was not true. So they gave themselves. The people, of course, became even more discouraged as the war went on, and as more and more of their young people were coming back dead. And it seemed like very often the enemy was prevailing, was winning. And so they took all this, many people took this out on their leader, condemning him. There were others who wanted power, others who were committed just to themselves. Some members of his own family, these royal, glorious aristocrats, also went against their own relative, the Tsar himself. The newspapers, in a land that was ruled by an absolute dictator, or autocrat, not dictator, but autocrat, really had more freedom than our newspapers do in America. Freedom to print terrible slanders against the royal family, against the Tsaritsa especially. They somehow chose her, this German woman, to be the one that would receive a good bit of the criticism, of the slander, and made up stories, incredible stories, about the people around them and what was happening. Things that were really meant to just sell newspapers, really, like they do today very often, especially the, I can't remember what they're called, the ones that come out with all the stars and so forth, anyway. And so they were slandering. More and more slander was piled upon them, lies. And finally, even with the advice of his own family, not the immediate family, not all of the family, but many of his own relatives, was persuaded to abdicate his responsibility as Tsar. He did it because, for the same reason that Boris and Gleb had given their lives, in order to keep civil war from happening in Russia, to save human life, because he cared more for his people than he did for his position, for his honor, or for anything about himself. And so he abdicated. And the democratic government, this is not the communist government we're talking about, the democratic government, the one that somehow our government would have approved of, probably, took him, imprisoned him, and dishonored him in the prison, in the confinement itself. And then, of course, when the communists took over, they just increased that 100-fold. But it started not with atheists, not with communists, but by believing, supposedly, Christians who wanted a democratic society in Russia. So really, the nation, the people, turned against their own rulers. A great number of them, a huge number of them. So that when communism came in, somehow the people were already prepared, mentally prepared with all the slanders and lies and everything else that had happened and all the tragedy of the First World War. All of these things to accept, to give up their faith. We're talking not about just a few. We're talking about many. Many of the babushkas that had before been in the churches, venerating the icons, were now taking them out of the church, throwing them on a bonfire to be burned. And the church is being destroyed. Now the people themselves in many cases. This is how terrible things had gotten by that time. The family, the royal family itself, were kept in confinement. As I said, after the communists took over, it was even worse. More ridicule, more mocking. During all this time, the Tsar, Tsaritsa Alexandra, Tsarina, Alexei were writing letters that we actually have. We have some of these wonderful letters that talk about how they are suffering, but that they're offering their sufferings to Christ. They're suffering for salvation, not just their own salvation, because they had a sense also who they were as chosen leaders of this land, that they were suffering for the people as well. They were suffering in the name of Jesus Christ. They never wavered for 1 second in their faith during all this time, thinking in the back of their heads, though nobody had told them, that probably they were going to be killed. All of them. And the Tsar and Tsaritsa were preparing the children for death, preparing them to meet this moment. And we know that they were finally taken to Ekaterinburg, central Russia, and there they were confined again. And during, I think, the late hours of the night, early hours of the morning, they were taken in darkness down to a basement, and there just brutally shot, all of them. And in this kind of shooting, death was not immediate. The Tsar was able to see his children, his wife, being killed, and his son. He was seeing all of this. They were seeing each other being killed. And commending themselves, I'm sure there was terror, there was horror also, screaming. But also there was faith that was there as they were dying. Their bodies were dishonored, dismembered, thrown down a well with lye and so forth after them to try to destroy them as much as possible. The next day we know that there's our sister Elizabeth, the nun Elizabeth. I really don't like calling her Grand Duchess at this point. When she became a nun, she gave that up. It's gone. She was no longer Grand Duchess. She was the nun Elizabeth. And she was killed along with those who were with her. Some of the royal family, servants, and others were thrown down a well, a mine shaft in Alapaysk, not too far away from Yekaterinburg. And they were there, as we know, for several days because people reported that they were singing the hymns of the church as they were dying, slowly dying. Some of them impaled on broken rafters and other things, dying horribly in pain. But encouraging one another as Christians would do, rather than dying in despair or anger or condemning those who killed them. So we have a wonderful family here. And really, I think it's the ideal family. It really ends up being ideal. that matches the ideal of some of the early Christian families as well, where the father of the family would literally lead the whole family into martyrdom before a Diocletian or a Maximian or a Licinius or a Nero or any of those. Would lead his whole family. And the parents would encourage the children, not say, okay, lie, just lie for now. Lie and get out of this, then you can repent before God and everything will be okay. God will forgive. No. Encouraging them. Confess Christ to the very end. Confess Him with all your heart. Confess Him with all these horrible tortures. With all the horrible tortures that were inflicted by the glorious Roman Empire. So we have this family also imitating exactly the beauty of that martyrdom, of those early martyrdoms. The father leading his family into witness for Jesus Christ, to witness that He is the living God, that He, in Him is life, outside Him there is no life, and that life will continue on past this time of torment, dishonor, and will go forever. That they will grow in Him forever. This is Christian faith, brothers and sisters. This is Christian faith, and this is the Christian family. This is what it's meant to be. How many of us would be willing? It's possible we could face such persecution. It's possible. I hope we don't, but it's possible. How many of us would encourage our children to prepare them for death and not do everything we could to try to have them even reject Christ Himself if necessary, at least for the time, in order to escape death and torture? May God help us to commit ourselves once more today and ask the prayers of St. Nicholas, Tsaritsa Alexandra, Tatiana Maria Oben, Anastasia, Alexis, Elizabeth and Barbara, Eugene, Clement, another Anastasia, all of these servants, all of these who gave their lives for Christ. They're examples. They know that He's living. They know He exists. And they know He is living. They know that He loves them more than anything on this earth. May God help us that we also, through their prayers, commit ourselves exactly to this. That we, as the Tsar said, if there needs to be a sacrifice, I will be that sacrifice. The blessing of the Lord be upon you, for His grace and love for mankind always, now and ever, and unto the ages of ages.